Good evening and welcome back to the Savvy Street Show. Today is podcast 6 and we have two eminent guests again. You may be familiar with them already. First up, we have Walter Block, eminent libertarian and economist and author of Defending the Undefendable, which I always thought should have been indefensible. But now both are English words. Walter changed the dictionary. And we also have Roger Bissell, who is a musician, editor, and philosopher. We won't need his music today, but sure we'll need his philosophy. Welcome to the show, Roger.
Hello, hello.
And welcome, Walter, as well. So, today's podcast 6 in this series on libertarianism, and today's topic was a little bit complex, a little bit where I find myself, to be honest, far less well read than these two folks here. I used to always regard left libertarianism, which is our topic today. Should left libertarianism be considered a libertarianism at all? And I always thought that left libertarianism was like an ugly boil on the backside of libertarianism, which won't go away. You know, you tried everything, creams, antibiotics, bursting the pimple, but doesn't go away. But maybe I've been wrong and I should have always loved them like our siblings. So we'll find out if my mind changes today. Part of the definition of left libertarianism is that they do actually believe in free markets and self-ownership, but they want a redistribution of the products of self-ownership, which kind of is very, very fuzzy. At least in the political sphere, I belong to a libertarian party here in Australia. There is the one in the US, the one in Argentina. I am aware of one in New Zealand. None of them are for higher taxes and redistribution. So I am going to start with Roger. And does this kind of left libertarianism, if I defined it right, does it hold water? And what distinguishes them then from mainstream libertarianism? Roger?
Well, first of all, if you've got any extra cream you could send me, that would be good, because I think I got one of those boils after listening to your question. Well, to my knowledge, Vinay, there are at least two wings of this left libertarianism community. I'm going to oversimplify a little bit, but I just think of them as the European and the American versions. And I know there's some of each in each, but we'll pass over that. As far as I know, the American wing is represented by thinkers like Roderick Long and Gary Chartier, and they do not support redistribution or universal basic income any more than they do government interference in personal issues or economic issues in general. And I could be wrong about this, and Walter or they later, if they see this, they can correct the record. The main wing of the left libertarians, though, they do appear to support these kind of policies. They do not, they reject Lockean property rights. Anything you claim to own is automatically up for grabs by the redistributionists, whether it's local, state, or national, whatever. In my opinion, anyone who rejects property rights is automatically non-libertarian. So left libertarians of the European flavor, well, that's definitely a misnomer. These people argue, and they don't give any proof that I've seen, that everyone has this collective share in natural resources. And so if you mix your individual labor with this collective property out the woods or the minerals in the ground or whatever, that doesn't legitimately make it yours. And if you do that and you try to assert that you own it, you're actually stealing from the community, the thing you've produced with your very own individual labor. And also, the community educated you, so they may have that claim on you too. Like Barack Obama once said, you didn't build that. And Hillary Clinton said something else like that. She said, oh, it takes a village. You're right. Okay. Now, I try to think about where did this notion come from? I looked it up, and a long time ago, there was a French anarchist socialist named Pierre Joseph Proudhon. and he lived mostly in the early 1800s, and his famous saying was, "Property is theft." And he meant that if you're a landowner or a capitalist, you steal your profits from the people who work for you. And of course, there's no explanation of how the workers own what they produce either, since you could argue both the capitalists and the workers are stealing the product they make from everybody else. So anyway, I don't know how they figure that out, but the European left libertarians are definitely collectivists, and they do not agree with property rights. And the American left libertarians, they tend more to be individualists. That's somewhat of an overgeneralization, again, like I said, but that's my quick answer. But there is more to it. Even the Roderick Long, Gary Chartier wing, who do, I think, support Lockean property, they are still anti-capitalist because they think capitalism is immoral. Now, why would it be immoral? Because they do like exchange of property and free market and all that. But why is capitalism so bad? Well, not just because it steals from the community and the workers, but it treats the workers badly. So it's immoral because it treats them badly. And we know if you run a business or if you've worked for one, capitalist enterprises are structured like a bureaucracy. They are hierarchically structured, and they have an authority structure. That means that if you're a worker, the further down you are in the structure, you are further beneath the owners, and therefore you are lower than them. You are inferior to them, and so you're oppressed by them because they boss you around. They subject you to authority. And this idea goes back to Proudhon also. He said that an employee is, and here's a direct quote, employee is subordinated, exploited. His permanent condition is one of obedience. So whether you're a European or American flavor of left libertarian, you think that a really libertarian economy is going to have production carried out without any authority structure, without any of this nasty stuff they call bossism. If there could be such a thing as capitalism without bossism, I don't think they would want to make it the law, use the government to impose it on the existing economy. Instead, they would like to dismantle the state to get rid of government and then let the voluntary interactions between people just naturally kind of replace authority structures. So it'd be kind of like Marx in a way. As the state withers away, this bossism stuff would
Yeah,
wither
yeah,
away too.
yeah.
So
It is a sort of Marxist or syndicalism, whatever they call it.
yeah, well, I'm
Which
kind of
is,
cynical about syndicalism, if you don't mind.
I'll come back to you on that issue. Walter, do you define left libertarians in any other way? Do you regard them as a boil or a sibling?
Well, the way I see the issue, is that there are those who are thin libertarians and those who are thick libertarians. What's a thin libertarian? I'm a thin libertarian. I wish I weighed a little less. But that's a different issue. We're not talking about how much you weigh. We're talking about your ideology, your philosophy. And I think, one of the thinnest of thin libertarians, because for me, libertarianism is just two things: Lockean private property rights based on homesteading and the non-aggression principle, and that's it. Nothing else. And I agree with Roger that there are two versions of left libertarian. One is Proudhon and Murray Bookchin, who are just a bunch of commies, and they don't deserve the name libertarian. They're just total commies, and I don't even think they would want to be associated with us libertarians. Then there's this other group. Mainly, they're focused around this group called Bleeding Heart Libertarians. The Bleeding Heart Libertarians have a blog. There are 2 or 3 dozen, maybe 4 dozen of them. Some of the people I would mention would be Roderick Long, that Roger mentioned. I would also mention Mike Humer and Matt Zwolinski. These are people who are really libertarians, but they're not thin libertarians. They adhere to the non-aggression principle and private property rights, fine, but they add on other stuff. Like you have to be nice. You don't have to be nice, because from the thin libertarian point of view, because the thin libertarian point of view is just a theory of crime. When are you a criminal? You're a criminal if you grab somebody's property or you interfect with his body against his will. But you don't have to be nice. I can go like this to people and say, hey, and I'm still compatible with libertarianism. And then they add on a whole bunch of other things, like somehow interracial marriage is good. No, interracial marriage is neutral. We have no view whatsoever on interracial marriage, except that it should be legal, of course.
Right.
But these people are saying somehow it's virtuous. Well, it might be virtuous according to left libertarianism, but it's not. But you don't get any extra brownie points as far as thin libertarianism is concerned. Another one is homosexuality. For these people, somehow homosexuality is, I would say, better than heterosexuality, but we have to be nice to or kind to. No, we don't have to. We can avoid them. We can boycott them. We can boycott anyone we damn well please, because boycotting is part of freedom, because we believe in free association. So, Roger was exactly right on Roderick Long. He believes that bossism is somehow bad. No, bossism isn't bad. I used to play the violin, and I played in a big orchestra, and I'm not that good. And every once in a while, the conductor would say, "Look, shape up." And the conductor was my boss. And if I didn't shape up, he would have kicked me out of the orchestra. Well, that's bossism. Well, it's voluntary bossism. Nothing wrong with voluntary bossism. Now, coercive bossism is very different. That's rape and murder and kidnapping and stuff like that. I wanted to add one more complication, and that is there are also right-wing thick libertarians. The only one that I know for sure is Hans Hoppe. What's Hans Hoppe's view? That homosexuality is bad. That homosexuals should be excluded from society. Now, this is an abomination, equally. So, from a thin libertarian point of view, we're against the left-wing libertarians and we're against the right-wing libertarians, because they each add something to the non-aggression principle and private property rights based on homesteading. And that's the thin libertarian view. The view of libertarians on homosexuality is that it should be legal. And if homosexuals want to have a contract which looks like marriage, God bless them. And if you prohibit that, then you're violating their rights. On the other hand, to say that they have to be kicked out of society is an abomination. I mean, we've got some very, very important homosexual libertarians, Ralph Raico, Ron Hamaway, whole bunches of other people that are magnificent contributors to liberty and libertarianism, and to say that they should be excluded from society is an abomination.
Okay, let me come back to Roger on this whole issue of bleeding heart libertarianism, and Roger was about to talk about the bosses, which I always think, well, ex ante, you do a contract and you agree to be an employee somewhere where somebody is going to be a boss. You can decide, oh, I don't want to sign a contract, I'll start my own business. So over to Roger, bleeding heart libertarians and this issue of bosses.
Well, I'm really done talking about bossism, and I liked everything that Walter said. So let's just go on and look at the cardiac issue here, the bleeding heart issue. uh, you know,
yeah, they're not dead yet.
yeah. Some of them call themselves neoclassical liberals. I mean, everybody, if you want to get a leg up on the others in your field, you put neo in front of your label and then automatically, oh, that's really cool. And some of them have been promoting Milton Friedman's ideas, like he's got did have ideas for school vouchers and a negative income tax, some kind of a universal basic income. And they've been trying to get a foot in the door so that the liberals and egalitarians will talk with them by showing that, libertarians are not indifferent to the poor and all we care about is property rights, blah, blah, blah. Well, as people, that's one thing. But as libertarians, the whole idea, as Walter said, is it's a political philosophy. Zwolinski, he's kind of the ringleader of that. However, Roderick Long apparently was the one who invented the term bleeding heart libertarian. So I think he came up with this almost 30 years ago. So it's it's as old as one of my kids. Anyway, um, now they also talk about social justice. That's a big deal, and they aren't just focusing on what the government does or social programs. They want to dig into what libertarianism means, and they think it's more than just, as Walter said, the non-aggression principle and property rights and homesteading. Roderick, again, he's the culprit here. He pops up a lot. Uh, I helped edit a book with Chris Gabara and Ed Youngkins about 6 years ago called The Dialectics of Liberty, and Roderick contributed a piece to it called Why Libertarians Should Be Social Justice Warriors. Now, if that's not a red flag to the bull, I don't know what is. I mean, uh, he's saying, I'm just going to try to be as fair to him as I can, and then I'll just let it dangle in midair. He says there's actually two aspects of morality that both have to be considered in order for libertarianism to be fully moral. Well, as Walter says, to be fully moral, you just have to not commit a crime for a libertarian. But there are people who say uh, uh, they think we're rather thick if we don't get this, this idea. Um, there's benevolence, and you have to have a certain minimum level of equality, and so they say there has to be concern for the least advantaged. And there's also justice, and so you have to be committed to homesteading and self-ownership and to the individual. Now, the whole idea is they try to balance these, and that seems to be the style in the last 5 or 10 years in a lot of these the libertarian intellectuals, is how to balance the concerns of individual rights and justice, whatever that might be, however you might define it. And so Roderick Long's not the only one who's come up with this notion, and I don't like it any better than I do this idea that being a bleeding heart, being a person who cares, is an essential part of libertarianism. I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to say libertarianism is more than just a political theory, and people should have moral concerns about their relationships with other people. But what should those moral concerns be? Well, I'll figure that out. Thank you very much. And I don't lose my John Hosper's David Nolan membership card if I don't agree with you on what moral concerns I should have. Okay, I see it as kind of a Trojan horse. I don't know if the other two of you do or not, but I see this whole thing about social justice and bleeding heart is kind of a Trojan horse, and we have a very troubled mixed economy we're living in, and so much discord. And when people trot out this and throw it into the current discussion about what should current policies be, I see it more as helping, aiding and abetting the people who are trying to push for more government. I don't see it working to damp down the amount of government we have. I'll just say that right libertarians, Christian libertarians, I consider myself a centrist, just a libertarian. We're trying also to get clear on what the foundations for liberty are. And there's not going to be any easy agreement about what there is beyond, as Walter said, the non-aggression principle and Lockean rights and homesteading. And if anything more, those things ought to be set in stone and not balanced off against something else. If you call yourself a libertarian and you're fudging around the edges with those things, I think you're like I said earlier, you're skating on thin ice.
Okay. Before I move on to equalization of opportunity, I do want to ask you, Walter, whether you want to add to that. Yeah.
I'd like to add to
Yes, go on.
I like Roger's point about the Trojan horse. I never thought of it that way. I just thought of him as suck-ups, but he's more scholarly than I am.
No.
I think part of the motivation of these people is they notice that we're not winning, and they want to win. They want to be accepted. They want the New York Times to, publish them, or whatever the thing would be, and they're trying to ingratiate themselves. They're jettisoning libertarian theory in order to suck up to the mainstream. One of the examples I use is immigration. Now, I'm an open borders person, and in order to keep bad guys out, we privatize everything. And now, if you want to come in here, you have to, get the permission of the owner, and every square inch is owned. But what they'll do is they'll say, well, we should allow the government to keep the bad guys out or something. But they're jettisoning libertarian theory. And I see myself as a purist. I don't like to give up libertarianism. I like to make libertarianism show that it can be, what am I looking for, pragmatic or utilitarian.
Or big church, yeah.
The stuff with privatizing roads. I wrote a book on privatizing roads. And the idea here is we don't want the government to have roads and do it better. We don't want to be efficiency experts for the state. And that's what Murray Rothbard called Milton Friedman, an efficiency expert for the state. This idea of the school vouchers thing, it's an attempt to make public education more efficient. Where we don't want more efficient public education, we want private education. With regard to there's one group I wanted to mention, and that's called the Triple L. Mark Victor is in charge of that, and he's a friend of mine. And he sort of veers toward left libertarianism, but not really. I'm not sure where he stands, but I thought I'd mention him because we mentioned all these other groups. And his idea is, yes, pure libertarianism, but you have to be nice. But that's only if you want to be on the inner circle. If you're part of the Triple L, you don't really have to be nice. I'm not sure. But I just thought I would mention that because we're mentioning all these other groups, and he's an important part of the libertarian movement. So I thought I'd mention him as well.
Thank you. Now, I am sympathetic to Roger's Trojan horse view. I do think that the word liberal, which was a pure word, was probably deliberately corrupted by the Marxists and neo-Marxists on the left. And this could be another way of doing it. So, but leaving that, we are moving into equal opportunity now. And at first glance, it sounds really nice, isn't it? We'll have compulsory and free schooling, maybe even free universities, so to equalize the opportunity so that the poor can go and learn just as well. And they start out almost the same. But these people never talk about what the government has a natural inclination to do, is to not educate, but to indoctrinate. And moreover, there's a lot of things that you cannot do. Even with law, you can't equal things. Like, there's so many things about humans: beauty, talents, physical size, attributes such as natural athleticism, IQ, sexual attractiveness. How do we equalize? Like, it always happens on dating sites that a certain percentage of men get 90% swipes and the remaining 95% all put together get 5 or 10% of the swipes. So lots of things cannot be redistributed. So Roger, how do these people address this issue, the left libertarians?
State again what the issue is. You were talking about dating sites. Now what is your question?
Well, there are so many things that, one, you cannot equalize the opportunity, such as, on dating sites and IQ and athleticism. But in addition, where you try to equalize it through free and compulsory schooling, they're missing an important issue there. Free and compulsory schooling changes quickly into free and compulsory indoctrination.
Oh, okay. The indoctrination question.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I wanted to quickly mention that Walter was talking about Milton Friedman being the efficiency expert for the government. He did this for a long time. Back in World War II, he was the one who proposed the idea for withholding tax from everybody's weekly paycheck so as to help jumpstart the financing for the U.S. government's efforts in World War II. And it was supposed to be a temporary expedient, right? A temporary expedient. And yet, well, it hasn't gone away. Okay. Anyway, back to your question. I guess it depends on what you mean by public education. Now, if the schools and universities are state run, and if the government is setting the curriculum and there's compulsory attendance, then it would be a huge opportunity for indoctrination, and it is. It's proved it to be. And left libertarians would probably oppose that as much as other libertarians would. But if the schools are decentralized and run on a community or local basis and attendance were voluntary, then I think at least the left libertarians who are really libertarians, like Roderick Long or Kevin Carson, they probably see that as no more of a danger for indoctrination than the fire department or the public roads. You keep the state out of the education and it's provided entirely by markets or local communities. I think that's what they'd like to see. And they might like to see taxes or fees to give either directly to the schools or to the parents for vouchers or grants for the kids. But the more competitive and local it is, the less they would worry about indoctrination. Now, there's something related to indoctrination that I think is a real problem with on the university level. And that's right now we're seeing the federal government trying to get universities to end some of the biased policies they have against certain viewpoints and certain ethnic groups. And I fear that's only going to be partially successful and only temporary, because if the other party wins back Congress and the White House in 3 years, well, it'll just swing back the other way. I have not heard left libertarians speak out much about that, except, they say, freedom of speech is being violated by denying tax funds or accreditation to the institutions that are hard on the Jewish kids or whatever. And I just think that they're not really consistent upon who they see as being oppressed and abused. And you see certain groups, because they ace out the SAT tests. I'm sorry, you have to go to the back of the line because you're not an underprivileged group. And so that seems to be a real problem. And I don't hear them saying much about that.
Okay. Walter, does equalization of opportunity go down the wrong road, or do they have a solution?
Certainly. I don't have an equal opportunity to be in the NBA. I'm 5'6", and I can't.
It's not
fair. We should have. What did they say? We want a professoriate that looks like America. Well, if we had that, then the NBA, which is 90% black, something like that, we'd have to kick out. I think the blacks are only 15% or 14% of the population. So if we had proportionality, we'd have to kick out a magnificent athlete who can jump 40 feet up in the air. I'm exaggerating, but only slightly. So somehow we never want to apply this idea of equalization to the NBA or to the National Football Association or anything like that. We just want to apply it to schooling. And Donald Trump, God bless him, is trying to stop this. Now, I think I diverged a little bit from Roger here, who said, well, when the next president gets in, they'll push it back to where it is now. Well, at least we'll have had some small time when we had some sort of representation of conservatives and libertarians. You know what the Sodom and Gomorrah test is? The Sodom and Gomorrah test is God was going to smite Sodom and Gomorrah because they were evil. And an angel went up to God and said, if I can find 10 righteous people, let them go. And God said, okay. Well, what's the Sodom and Gomorrah test? The Sodom and Gomorrah test is, can you find 10 either conservative or libertarian professors at Harvard? Now, Harvard's got about 3,000 professors, and you can't find 10. And Donald Trump, bless him on this. I disagree with him on other things, but here on Harvard, he is magnificent, and also Columbia, my old school where I got my degree. What Donald is really saying, if I could put words in his mouth, is, look, you want to be a racist and you don't want the whites in there and you want to have all socialism, fine, go, good. But don't do it with the government dime or with tax money. And don't think you're going to get tax exempt status either. So no more funds for you, no more tax exempt status, and now go, do it. And what they say is, well, somehow he's preventing them from doing their socialist thing. He's not. He's just saying, do it with your own money. And also, he's going to tax some of their endowment. So I'm a big fan of Donald on this one. I think that on Milton Friedman, I wanted to add to what Roger said about this withholding tax supposed to be temporary. Ronald Reagan said it well. He said, there's nothing as permanent as a temporary government program.
Yeah. Good one. Okay, yeah, I think we should, all old men should have equal opportunity to walk the catwalk too, alongside models and everything. Where does it stop? So this brings me to a major concern of mine. I always thought the word libertarian, before I started reading about Bleeding Hearts and the other people, I thought it was free in one sense. It was correct and completely identified us, versus liberal, which is a word we still use in the right sense in Australia and in Europe. And Murray Rothbard, I think, took this word on, the libertarianism. And I'll start with Walter on this one. Is it the right? Was that right for Murray Rothbard to choose that word, or maybe it was right then and it's no longer right? Are we looking for a new word to describe our philosophy, or should we be?
Well, I think this idea that we want to convert people to freedom and liberty and libertarianism, and should we jettison words so that we'll be more acceptable? I don't really see it. I mean, Murray used to say anarchy is good enough for me. I've been an anarchist all my life, or not all his life, but all of his adult life, all of his conscious life. So I don't see why we should give up on words. The more words we have, the better. They're always trying to take words away from us. And, capitalism is evil. Well, should we say, well, we don't really favor capitalism, but we favor free enterprise? Uh, why lie? We favor capitalism. We favor free enterprise. The more synonyms we have, the better. And if we have to give up words because it will make ourselves more palatable, well, it's interesting.
Sorry, can I interrupt you there? Not to make us palatable, but because the word has been muddied. And I think Rothbard's argument was liberal word has already been muddied, so let's use libertarian. Sorry.
Well, we do call ourselves classical liberals. I mean, the way I see our movement at the top is anarcho-capitalist. The next group would be minarchists, limited government, Ayn Rand, Nozick, people like that. And then Ron Paul, a little lower, constitutionalist, because he adds post offices and post roads. And then classical liberals like Hayek and Friedman. Now, we've been bashing Friedman, and there's nothing wrong with bashing Friedman, but he's not all that bad. He's a lot better than Joe Biden or any number of other people I could see. So I think classical liberals are part of our group. And the way I see it, 1% of us are anarcho-capitalists, and the other three are 33% each, roughly. So I think we should keep the word liberal, as in classical liberal, which is what we're sort of known as. Whereas if we start giving up words in order to become more palatable, no, I think we have to be honest, and we don't want to allow the worst examples to come up, but we want to stick to our guns or our principles. I think that would be the way to go.
Okay, Roger, just let me clarify. I think the word has been muddied, and not to make it palatable, but to make it distinct. I agree with the classical liberal is still very, very distinct in everywhere that I see. No one has muddied the waters yet. And one other thing I came up with was natural rights humanism. You may have read an essay. I published 2 essays on Savvy Street on calling ourselves natural rights humanists.
Yeah.
So where are you on this whole name game? Would you rather call us a rose is a rose or something else?
Well, first, I'd like to clear up this issue about Walter's notion of trying to make the NBA look like America, and, and and the only good thing I could see about that is that it would help finally satisfy the women's NBA demands for equal pay, because it would so crater the attendance and revenues for the NBA that their salaries would plummet, and finally you have income equality. Anyway, the whole issue of what to name our philosophy. Well, if we're just talking about the political philosophy, the thin view, sure, libertarianism, or classical liberalism. I will say there is a problem of muddying, and you have too wide an umbrella, and then, well, you're like you're a dog, but what breed of a dog are you? Well, if you got a whole bunch of incompatible ideologies, like humanism, are you a libertarian humanist? Are you a socialist humanist? You've got to call yourself something and make it stick, just like classical liberal. Well, people look at classical liberals, you think, oh, wow, I thought a liberal was somebody who liked big government, and so they say, well, you like Beethoven and big government, classical music, or what was the other thing? Humanism. Well, religious libertarians are going to hear humanism and they're going to hear secular. And they're going to think, man, these are a bunch of godless atheists, just like those Russian communists were. And so I don't see, you've got to pick a term, you've got to stand your ground and just define it. If you have to stand on your head every other time you talk to people, you do it. Now, I have a little bit different approach to this, and Vinay have worked on this, and I have worked on this some. Instead of thick or thin, I think that what's needed is a Goldilocks view, something that's just right. And so I regard the personal morality, like being nice and being just and all this stuff, as kind of personal morality. And then over here, you've got politics, you've got not being a criminal, respecting people's rights. In the middle, if people just looked at each other as being an autonomous individual who has dignity and needs to be treated as an end in themselves and not just something that you can use without their consent. Like Walter said, if you consent to being boss, well, what's the problem? You just do it. But if people are going around trying to exploit others or let others exploit them because they have no real constructive purpose, but instead they're just they just view people as pawns. Well, I don't think that wouldn't be a healthy society, and it wouldn't be very enjoyable or constructive to live in. So I think that kind of thing, Immanuel Kant talked about it, Ayn Rand talked about it, Vinay and I in our book on Aristotle, modernizing Aristotle's ethics, we came up with, Vinay came up with the 3 orders of humaneness, and I said, oh, let's have one more. So we have the 4 orders of humaneness, and it's all about that. It's all about not aggressing and respecting people's autonomy and not just using them like they're your property, unless you have a contract for it, of course, and then you can do it.
Okay.
So that's how I think if we could get enough people to agree to look at their fellow human beings that way, then they can do what they want in the privacy of their own home. And if they contract to do this or that or the other, that's fine. But otherwise, that is kind of the Goldilocks idea that I think would really get us a long way toward a free society, because our founding fathers had something really good already set up. They had a society of really responsible people who treated each other with respect. They weren't necessarily nice, but they recognized that each of them had they were an individual person that deserved to be respected, their rights to be respected. And I think that's why we have as good of a government as we have still today.
Okay. Final question of the day, and I'm going to start with Walter. We could, I guess, just on the name side, we could call ourselves right libertarians if we need to perfectly distinguish ourselves. If the number of boils increase a lot, then there's BHLs and social justice warriors and all the rest, and we got to cover our ass all the time, as they say. Which is a good thing. But then there was Barry Goldwater, who was as free market as one could come in politics. And on the political side, both I heard Vivek Ramaswamy as well as one of our co-panelists, Ed Maslish, use the term conservatarian. I mean, Ramaswamy didn't use the term, but that's where he was leaning. So that we're sort of a mixture of conservatives and libertarians. I mean, Ron Paul got his bigger victories, if you will, standing under the Republican, not re-libertarian or some such thing, Republican flag. So is there a way, would you, if you were high up in the political side or had money like Elon Musk, would you try to merge the Libertarian Party with the Libertarians and make for a new sort of a right-wing libertarianism? Walter?
Well, I don't see us as either right or left. The conservatives are a little not so bad on economics. They're horrible on personal liberties. You ingest the drug that they don't like or engage in a voluntary consensual sex for money, they'll put you in jail. So they're horrible on personal liberties. They're not so bad on economics. The left is the opposite. They're not so bad on personal liberties. Oregon was the only state in the union to legalize cocaine, not marijuana, cocaine, which would be a libertarian thing. And there are a bunch of lefties in Oregon. They're horrible on economics, and they're not so bad on personal liberties, sex, drugs, whatever. So I don't see we should have any amalgamation with anyone, except for areas where we agree temporarily. For example, Murray was always having amalgamations with the left on the Vietnam War, because the left was good on the Vietnam War, namely they wanted it to end, whereas the right was horrible. I remember I was once at a YAF, a Young Americans for Freedom conference, and some libertarians were burning draft cards, and the left was bitterly opposed to that, whereas rather the conservatives were opposed to burning draft cards. So I don't think we should amalgamate, except for the personal issues. Like if it comes up to should we get rid of the minimum wage law or get rid of unions, and we can make an alliance with the conservatives. Should we legalize prostitution or pornography? Let's have a liaison with the left. Fine, but we have to stand fast for ourselves. Now, I also wanted to mention one or two things that came up. I'm sure Roger was just a typographical error when he said the founding fathers were so great. Minor point, slavery, so I'm sure Roger would agree with me on that. Apart from slavery, everything he said, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't doubt that for a moment. I also wanted to mention just a little bit about academic freedom in return to Harvard and Donald Trump. What's so great about academic? See, what Harvard is saying is Donald Trump is ruining our academic freedom. Well, he's not. He's saying you can have all the academic freedom you want on your own dime.
Right.
But what's so great about academic freedom? Look, I'm going to set up Walter Block University. And you guys want to be professors? You have to bow down to me. And everything you say has to be Walter Block is great every third sentence or something like that. Namely, I've ruined your academic freedom. Am I a criminal? No, it's a little crazy. I'm not going to have this university, but I'm trying to say, look, suppose we had plumber's freedom. I asked the plumber to come in and fix my bathtub, and he starts fixing the pipe over here. And I said, well, I want you to fix the bathtub. And he said, no, I have plumber's freedom. No such thing as academic freedom in that regard. And then I wanted to mention the pragmatic problem with affirmative action. What you do, you get at Harvard, and you get some of the brightest kids get 1,600 on the SAT, and then you get some people from other ethnic groups that have a 1,200 or 1,300, and they're 300-400 points below. Now they would do very well at Boston University, but not at Harvard, and yet they're at Harvard. And now the professors at Harvard have bimodal distribution. You've got some very bright people here, and you've got some people bright, but not quite there. And now, what do you do as a professor? And now the people who are let in when they shouldn't be let in, and instead of majoring in physics or math or chemistry, they major in Black studies or feminist studies or queer studies or something like that. Whereas if they had gone to a state university or some other place, they could have majored in something and gone to law school or whatever, but instead they go to poetry or sociology or something, which is just Marxism. So there are uh, uh, lots of reasons to think of affirmative action being critical, and here's a pragmatic one. I just wanted to say about Goldwater and Ron Paul, and also in terms of converting people. I asked, who were the two most successful people in converting other people to libertarianism? And my answer is Ayn Rand for my generation and Ron Paul for the next generation. Now you ask, what are these two people like? And they were almost polar opposites. I mean, Ayn Rand was nasty. She was, you sort of try to be nice to her, she'll slap you in the face. I'm exaggerating, but she was not a nice person. Whereas Ron Paul sort of exudes niceness. So from this, what I infer is that there's no one right way to do it. If Ayn Rand and Ron Paul, almost polar opposites in personality, are our two most successful people, well then there's no one right way to convert people, and the way to convert people is whatever is comfortable for you. So you shouldn't try to emulate anyone else. Do whatever is comfortable for you, and I think that would be the best way to convert people to libertarianism.
Okay, I actually know of an instance where not only some lecturers resigned over this admission policy of equalizing, this was not deliberate ethnicity but something else, but the next semester they were told to equalize the distribution. So we can't have all of them all in the pass grade, which some of them deserve to fail, and bunch of you standing here and you are high distinctions and distinctions. You got a distribution. They don't have a distribution, so we pull their distribution across. So it's getting ridiculous, to be honest.
Yeah.
Over to Roger. Would you sort of merge in a sense with libertarians, stand under the merge with Republicans, stand under the Republican umbrella, if you will, or would you just sit there and say, let's call ourselves right libertarians and that's good enough?
No, I like what Walter said on that. I think what you call ad hoc projects where we are supporting a particular issue. Yeah, as long as you, number one, don't get yourself identified with them because you're not clear enough on what you think. And secondly, that you take the opportunity, if you feel like it, to try to clarify their understanding of the principles involved. And it's not just a one off thing. But I'm still scratching my head, Walter, about how you seem to be saying that the libertarian movement is bipolar. I mean, it's like you're saying that it's partly nasty and partly nice, and my generation and yours are the nasty ones. We came from that direction, and then the younger ones, they're nice. Well, okay, maybe that's the direction libertarianism should go, is toward being nice. But this whole thing, liberal and conservative, and left and right. 65 years ago, Rand started speaking on campuses, and she said a plague on both their houses, and neither one of those mean anything helpful to help promote liberty. And I think the problem is the conventional understanding of the political spectrum. Most people look at it just as simply as a one-dimensional thing. You got the extreme leftist communism, and then a little further in, you got the liberals and Democrats, and then on the right, you got the fascists, and then you got the conservatives, and so on. And in the middle, the problem is not only you have the moderates and the wishy-washies, but they try to either put the libertarians in there, which is just plain silly, or they'll put us out on the extreme. Like, if these people are radicals, they're either commies, don't trust them, or they're fascists, which is usually what they do. David Nolan had a better idea about 55 years ago, and I'm going to try something new with all this technology. I've got a share button here, and I've got, oops, what happened? Okay, there it says screen, and where's my window? And there's the diagram. And now I'm going to share it. Okay, and there is the diagram.
Oh, wonderful.
And by golly, it worked, and I'm so happy. Now, if you look up toward the top, that's high economic freedom and high civil liberty, and that's libertarian. If you have low economic freedom and low civil liberty, that's down on the bottom. That's authoritarianism, or we could think of that as dictatorship or totalitarian, of both the communist and the fascist variety. Now, if you have high civil liberties and low economic freedom over on the left, that's liberalism. And over on the right, you have high economic freedom and low civil liberty, and that's conservatism. Now, that's a bit of an oversimplification, but it really does tell a good story, because I'm using my cursor here. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing, but I'm going from left to right, from liberal to conservative, and that is the spectrum that everybody understands. And instead of putting libertarians in the middle and the authoritarians at either end, you've got the libertarians up on the top where we belong. We are closest to the angels, and the authoritarians down on the bottom. We're closest to the devils. Yes. Okay. So I think this diagram, if it could be spread around the country, like the Gideons put Bibles in motel rooms, I I think this might help more than just about anything to give people a clear picture of how things lay out in the political spectrum. So now, if you're saying, should we make common cause with the conservatives over here? Well, there's a middle ground on issue after issue. We could get together with them or with the liberals, but with the authoritarians, no, not so much.
Oh, thank you. This this diagram is great. You can unshare it now if you want to. But what I love about it is when you say neither left nor right, people assume you're halfway through on every issue or you're too centrist.
Yep.
But in fact, on the economics, we're way towards the right. But this, we just face north. The compass faces north. So I really like it. I did notice that there was this little pimple on there, on the yellow triangle at the top, which I think is the boil of social justice people that we're referring to. But
Bleeding heart.
That says bleeding heart, social justice. But thank you both. It's been an extraordinarily illuminating and educative discussion. Is there a last line or two either of you wish to add?
Sure.
Walter?
Bravo, Walter.
Oh, that's good.
Whenever I take a survey as to where I am politically, left or right, I end up moderate. I'm really a moderate, because all the economic issues I'm on the right, and all the personal issues I'm on the left. And what they say on the spectrum is that the closer you are, the more similar you are. So you get Hitler and Stalin, polar opposites, but they're buddies. And then you get Mother Teresa, who's a lefty, and Stalin, who are close by. It's just crazy. So I think Roger did a splendid favor to us by his examination of the Nolan chart.
Thank you. Okay, it's been great. And to viewers and listeners, if you want to stay savvy, keep tuning in. And we will see you soon in a couple of weeks' time with another interesting topic of how we raise money in a classical liberal society voluntarily. And that will be podcast 7. Good night and good luck.
Take care, guys.